Let's eliminate that shame. You don't know what you don't know, right? And the first stage to recovery is acknowledging that you have a problem and that you don't know. Right?
Wow. This is powerful advice, man. This is the best podcast I've ever heard.
I feel like we're going to therapy right now. Yeah.
Yo. My name is Jonathan Steers. My co-host is Doug Diakite, and we welcome you to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Being an entrepreneur is hard. That is why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources that you need to find your own freedom. Today, we're joined by Kurtis Hanni, CFO guru, CEO coach, and financial consultant to tens of thousands in his weekly newsletter. Welcome to the FYF pod, Kurtis. We're glad to have you with us.
Hey, glad to chat today. Excited to jump in. So
welcome to the show.
Let's get right into it. Going through your background, your resume, your website, all the awesome things you have out there. Something that jumped out to me is how you just seem to have a lot of experience in different businesses, different companies. And one of the questions I get from a ton of people is like, Jonathan, how did you go from running hotels to running a dietary supplement company and now a few of the other companies? It seems like such a disconnect between doing those very different businesses. And I always kind of come back to the answer. It's like, well, business is business, marketing, operations, finance, which is your specialty, finance. Do you kind of feel that same way, that really it's like everything transitions because it's like it really all comes down to the same pinnacle pieces of business?
Oh, I 100% agree with that. Now, obviously from a financial perspective, there's going to be different things that you're tracking in different types of businesses. But when you look at the nuts and bolts, I do see that a lot is talking to different business owners. A lot of times you're like, well, why are you going into this other thing that you don't have an expertise in? And then you watch and you're like, oh, actually 80 to 90% of that carried over to that new company. And it's just learning where those differences are and being able to latch onto that and then find those experts or, improve your learning curve. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. Seen that a lot for sure.
So consulting for all these different varied businesses, I wanted to really immediately start the podcast off with, what are some of the common mistakes that you're like, man, this happens over and over. People open their books up to me and I see these main things happen wrong. Is there like a common error that you see financially or non-financially on these businesses that you're just like, God, guys, please stop doing this?
Well,
if I see this one more time.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's interesting. There aren't that many. I mean, there are common errors, but the most common error is kind of going broad here is like people just don't put enough attention on it until it's too late, right? They get focused in the business, which is completely understandable. I know. But I think the biggest thing is there was a stat, and I need to look it up, but 48% of business owners acknowledge that they don't understand their financial statements, meaning that they don't have a good sense of how their business is doing financially. And I think if 48% are willing to admit that, then I'd guess it's probably over 50% who actually don't know.
Oh, yeah. That's so true.
And I think it's understandable that they don't, but then there's that fear and uncertainty of acknowledging that and being willing to dive in. And so I think the biggest mistake just across the board is being fearful of looking like you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to your financial stuff. Because I think there's this expectation that that you're supposed to know.
You're supposed to know everything.
Exactly. And then acknowledging that you don't know is hard to do. And so like, that's honestly where I put myself is like, I want to be that person who helps you like take your guard down and be willing to acknowledge that you don't know, so that then we can start working towards, the common goals. And so, the reality is everyone's coding stuff wrong or doing stuff, that they probably shouldn't do, but they don't know any better. And it's just the nature of the beast. And so my goal is to just help you not feel like you're an idiot for not knowing, because I don't think you are. I think it's just the nature of a bunch of people that love getting into entrepreneurship, doing a lot of fun stuff. the finances are on the back burner for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And you got to make money so that you can keep operating. But past that, most entrepreneurs aren't really digging into it. And so I just want to take that shame out of not knowing and say that.
There we go. Yeah. Let's eliminate that shame. You don't know what you don't know, right? And the first stage to recovery is acknowledging that you have a problem and that you don't know. Right?
Wow. This is powerful advice, man. This is the best podcast I've ever heard.
I feel like we're going to therapy right now. Yeah. I feel like we're in therapy. Good.
At our company, Kurtis, we actually just brought on a virtual CFO this month, beginning of this month. I wish I would have known about you sooner. We might have been able to work together. But anyways, that aside, we're really interested in talking about your brand and wanted to ask, when did you create the Kurtis Hanni brand and domain name?
Yeah, I've been a CFO for 10 plus years in small businesses, and it wasn't until 2021 that I really started publishing and kind of writing about kind of the business finance stuff. I've always loved writing and loved kind of sharing my journey, and so I just done that on a personal basis. And in 2021, I got the harebrained idea that I wanted to start a podcast and started talking about random stuff. And then somewhere along in that journey, I was just talking about personal finance, a bunch of random other ideas. And I posted something about business finance because something had happened in one of the businesses that I was working with. And I just posted about some, deep dive on a financial topic, and it took off. And I thought, okay, I've always thought this stuff is boring to most people, but clearly there's people are interested in this, and this is what I care the most about. So I just started posting about it and grew my following and grew all that from that point. And so, in some sense, I was doing things because I wanted to be publishing, but in some sense, getting to the point where I am now was a happy accident from just putting something out there. So
yeah, I think a lot of people that start posting, they'll post on Twitter, X, post on LinkedIn. I'm just always curious, when someone gets the domain with their name as opposed to just doing those other platforms, was there a thought process or a grandmaster plan?
No, not a grandmaster plan. I had a personal website where, like I said, I just published blog posts just because I like to share what I was thinking about different stuff. And that was actually a different domain. And so when I got my Twitter and was doing my podcast, I thought, well, let's just buy this up. I can be a serial domain buyer too. So let's buy this up. And then I started posting the blog stuff there. And then slowly that just my brand kind of turned into the business stuff because that was what direction I went. And so that's kind of where it came from.
And then the consulting, was that prior to or around the same time or?
Yeah, I've consulted for different people off and on for a number of years. But it wasn't until I started posting about business finance that first I looked and I ran a cohort where I taught business owners financial statements and how to read them and, just all that stuff. And then I started from that, getting inquiries for more. And so then that was when I started building kind of a consulting practice on the side.
Cool. I like how what I'm hearing is you're kind of stepping out there, getting in front of the people, creating a community by just offering that value, offering the knowledge, and organically your following and your community builds and grows.
Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to just touch on while we're on the topic of the domain is your website. When I go to your website, it was different to me because it's just so simple, so to the point. And I was just curious if that was kind of an intentional thought process, if that's just how you roll and that's how it kind of came together, or did you, what was the thought process behind how you designed and built the site?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the middle of redesigning it, but it will be
it's too
the
simple.
Same. Yeah. No, well, it will still
let me unsimplify this.
It needs more complexity.
No, it will still be simple. And so what I have is I have my personal website, which is kind of where I'm doing the education and where I'm doing the brand. And then I have my CFO business, which is Bison CFO, which is sharing, which is where I do all of my consulting out of. And so that's where I'm trying to build the business behind. And then my personal stuff is more just the educational stuff that I'm going to do. And obviously that is a business in and of itself. But I just think people get distracted. I don't like really complex websites. And so I just went towards that. And I kind of look at my personal as it's going to be kind of a launching point into the other things that I'm doing. And so that's why I kind of tried to stay as simple as I could with that. Yeah.
I was wondering when the transition sort of happened. It looks like you kind of started doing mostly corporate or like general accounting work. When did the transition carry over into you wanting to do this on your own and kind of now turn into consulting, becoming a finance influencer, starting newsletters? Can you talk us through the evolution of that?
Yeah, for sure. And it is interesting. It actually, probably 6 months ago, I would have told this story differently because I thought, it all happens just kind of organically and by accident. But as I actually look back in my career, in some sense, it's a whole story that I can see was leading up to me going and being on my own, which is kind of interesting looking back with hindsight. Is from a very early on, I did not want to go the traditional, I was an accounting degree. I did not want to go the traditional public accounting route that most people went. So I was looking for other opportunities and started working at some big companies. And within a few years, I just realized, like within a pretty quick, actually less than a few years, I realized that's not what I wanted to do. So I started seeking out small business opportunities because I like the idea of getting more experience than just debits and credits, and that sort of deal from an accounting perspective.
Gotcha.
And so I went and got a job at a small business. And within a few years of being there, we were talking about acquiring businesses. We were talking about growing new businesses, all that sort of stuff. And so I worked with that. I worked with that owner to do that stuff. And through some of that, I had some opportunities to kind of take part in ownership stuff, and stuff just didn't really happen that way. And so then eventually I moved on and I went to a new job. And at that new job, I went to that new job because there was an opportunity to become one of the ownership group at that job. And that was the plan. And so that was 2.5 years ago. So, the other, for the past, 10 years, I've been in small businesses, and I look and I realize that since the beginning of that point, that was the path I was on the whole way. Every step along the way, I was thinking like an owner. So when I started doing my stuff online, my plan was to become an owner of the business I was working in and just kind of do this online on the side, kind of for fun, just make a little bit extra money, but not anything that would be full time. And then I kind of saw the potential that there was online, and I started looking at the two opportunities side by side. And then I had that realization of, oh, actually, this ownership conversation has been a conversation for a lot longer than I ever realized. And I realized, you know what? I'm probably going to regret if I don't take a shot on my own. And if I do this joint deal and just join into this thing. And so it was about a year and a half ago that I realized that. And at that point, I started talking to that CEO and just said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what's going on. And he kind of talked through with it. He said, no, you're right. I think you would regret it if you don't do it. So it was kind of at that point that we started working on how can I transition out? How can I leave this business in a good spot? And that was when I started kind of scaling that consulting business a little bit more. And actually, like I'd been cutting hours, and I just officially stepped out during the summer. And so it's only been since the summer that I've been full-time at my CFO consulting business and started trying to really scale and hire teammates and, do more than just work with me and one or two others. So
is there any recommendation for the audience in terms of like how you approached your CEO boss and started those discussions? Because I think that's a kind of an interesting piece. I feel a lot of people in your position would have been like, I don't know if I want to talk to him about my exit. I don't know if I want to share my plans. I'll just do some stuff in the background here, and then maybe it never happens, or you leave on bad terms. So how did you broach the subject, and what advice would you have on people trying to navigate that?
Yeah, and it's so difficult because culturally businesses can be so different. But
That's true.
From my perspective, in every situation I've been, I've always wanted to just be upfront. Like for me as an accounting person, me being the CFO, integrity is a big thing. And I always viewed I wanted to be someone that was above reproach, in anything that I did, because when you're working side by side with a business owner as a CFO, it's a lot closer and different relationship than you have, because they're probably the ones signing the checks. They're the ones who have done all of that stuff in the past. And now I'm coming in and I'm telling them this is the right way to do it. So they're essentially handing over the financial keys to me when I'm stepping into that role. And so I've always tried to operate from, I just am going to overshare what I'm thinking and what I'm going through, because I want them to feel like I'm never going to hold anything back from them. And I did that really early in my career, probably before I should have done it. And there was a situation where I changed jobs, and 2 months after I changed, they laid off a whole bunch of the people that had started when I'd started. And I realized at that point, I'm like, if I'd been there, I would have been laid off, because I told my boss I didn't want to be there for more than 2 years and I was going to move on. And it's like, oh, I would have been target on my back. But for me, that's one of my kind of core personal values, is that operating with that integrity and operating with that openness. And that if it falls out and does not work out like I would hope it would work out, if they don't like the fact that I'm doing that stuff, at least I can feel good about the way I approached it. And so if you're already in a situation, it can be hard a lot of times to walk some of that back. But I think, when I started my podcast, I shared with them I was starting my podcast. So I kind of shared with them different steps along the way, shared with them my intentions along the way. And then as stuff changed, I was very open of, hey, this is what I was thinking. This is what I told you. Well, now this has happened. And honestly, I'm feeling this way now. And so it was a continual conversation. It wasn't, I just went in one time and said this. So for me, it's sharing those other parts of your life and sharing the other things that you're doing, so that when it gets to that final conversation, it's not a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Because they've been involved in it the whole way. And that's going to look different for everyone because of what the relationship is between you and that boss, or what that relationship is.
That's the important piece right there. What's that relationship? Can I tell him, or do I know this is going to lead?
There's not one size fits all.
Yeah. And you in the business, like if it's a really big business, it's probably doesn't make sense for you to talk and do that way. But I've been working in small businesses. And so I really felt that I needed to honor that owner, because this business was his baby. This business was his thing that he had taken from beginning to end. And so, it's going to be different in every situation, but a lot of people like to go in and they make big pronunciations or proclamations, and that just is not generally good. And so I think just keeping open lines of communication.
There you go.
I told my direct reports when they worked for me, and I honestly don't know if anyone actually took me up on this, but I told them, I want what's best for you as a person before I want what's best for you as this business. And I think if I take this approach with you, that you'll want to stay here, because you'll see that we have your best interest at heart. But if it ever doesn't become within your best interest, then let's figure out a way for you to get out of here. I'll do what I can to help you, because I know in the long term, that's not you operating in that way is also not in the best interest of the business.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. And I did actually have one person kind of take me up on that, is they told me before they're leaving, hey, I'm frustrated because of these things. And I said, honestly, I can't change those things. Right. So I am not, let's work together and let's figure out how we can help you. And then eventually that person exited, and we made it work. And I just think, I'm going to try and operate my business that way as well, because I just think for me, that's a lot easier. I don't remember a lot of stuff, so it's a lot easier than having to try and remember all of these lies and things that kind of massaging of the truth that you've told people.
Yeah. I think what I'm getting out of that really is building relationships, making sure that you always hold yourself in integrity. I think it's the most important thing, and that will open the doors down the line. So I think I totally agree. That's such a critical piece. And then as you're kind of transitioning out of your current job, what's been the hardest part now since the summer of going into this new phase of, I don't even know, of entrepreneurship and this new frontier that you're embarking on?
Yeah, it's funny. You think because you've done it for a number of years in the background, you think you know what you're getting into. And then you just realize this is a completely new phase, and how hard it can be to balance all of those competing interests. And I think, I'm grateful that I wasn't starting from scratch, that I did have a head start on it. So I probably started off with more than just from ground zero. But for me, it's been the combination of figuring out what to prioritize and not focus on the wrong things. And then the second piece is trying to make sure that I shut it off for my family, right? Because now I'm coming in and working, in this office that's kind of attached to our garage. And I could sit in here all the time, and I could go pull that laptop and while we're doing, while we're watching TV at night or while we're doing whatever, and I could get super distracted. So that's been something I've had to really work on, because it's, when you enjoy and love what you're doing, it can be really easy to become obsessed with it and to lose that balance across the board.
Yeah, working from home is great, but you got to create those boundaries. Otherwise, it can seep into all the other parts of your life, your family, and other interests. So that's something that we got to navigate. And a lot of people over the past 3 years with the pandemic have been navigating the work from home. There seems like there's a new shift afoot with employers wanting to bring the employees back. That's a whole nother discussion for another time. So thinking about an accountant, I feel like as an accountant, you have like this deadly set of skills that you can take into the marketplace and really be a strong business person, because you have that financial acumen and you have the nitty gritty finance knowledge, and you take that into business. Yet I think about all these accountants that sit there and crunch numbers all day. And like you said, debits and credits, and it's a soul sucking, 30, 40 year career, just, punching the calculator. And, we all, I'm not sure what it really is. I've never been an accountant, but we all kind of have an idea of what it looks like. And it's crazy how so many people that have that, they become a CPA or they have the accounting background, how they just stay with it year after year after year and they hate it. Why do you think more of them don't, do what you're doing and transition out and take those deadly skills and go crush it as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a good question, and something I've honestly been thinking about a lot, because I think what you see with a lot of accounting people, with a lot of CPAs, because like if you look at CPA firms as a business, honestly, most of them aren't very good businesses. Like they may make some money, but they're super stressed. They're super attached to, their billable hour that they're doing right here. And that's like, it's honestly not a great existence for a lot of people.
Right.
And when you look to the actual degree of accounting, the new graduates are just plummeting because wages aren't keeping up, the fear of being replaced by AI, all of this. And then you see how unhappy so many of these people are. I think the differentiator is that you think about like, there's a lot of types of engineers, but you think about an engineer is there's a lot of engineers that are very just driven by the numbers and the calculation that they have. And then you have the other element of engineers that are the ones that go create crazy stuff, that do just crazy stuff, right? And there's a big disconnect between those two groups. And I think that's the same thing with accounting, is you get a lot of people that just become obsessed with the accounting. And that also makes them risk averse and fearful of taking the additional risk that's potentially out there with entrepreneurship.
Right.
And I think where maybe it's a little bit of luck, but also maybe a little bit of the way I'm wired, is by being in small businesses, you can't have success with that CEO if you're just telling them no, because it's going to cost money, right? So
you got to find ways and solutions. And
exactly. You don't actually say no. You say, okay, what's the way that we can make this work, right? We're always looking to be that teammate. And so I think so many people between being obsessed with with kind of the debits and credits element of the job, they get so into their head on that piece that it becomes hard to zoom out. And like for me, even like, I didn't know anything about sales and marketing until I got into a small business and had to dabble a little bit in different pieces just to have some of those conversations. And so I think when you don't have those skills, you take the risk adverse nature, and then you take just a love for that craft. It's a situation where people just don't, they won't go into this other realm of entrepreneurship a lot.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, there are a lot more skills than just knowing the finance piece. Now, staying with accounting, just for our audience who is looking at that career as a way to build the knowledge base and to not have a miserable existence while they maybe work towards long-term entrepreneurship, what do you see as the quickest way to get from being an accountant to a CFO, since you've done it? And how would you go about it differently if you're doing it all over again today?
Yeah. So I would say, this goes honestly for almost any job, but right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is probably applicable to all things.
Yeah. Be a problem solver, because, there's a lot of things that pop up in the accounting world that if you can be the one that is kind of the go-to, be really good with, technology and new tech, because that is where I got some advantages. Is I became the go-to person in these big companies to really help solve some of these problems. And it was because I got really good at Excel, really good at macros, and even just getting really into the weeds and a lot of that stuff. And then I think it is being willing to take those risks, because for me, jumping to a small business was a risk. I could have stayed at this big company. I was already doing well, had already been promoted, and could have just kind of climbed that ladder, right? But I think it's getting unique experiences. I know you had Clint. I know my buddy Clint Murphy on, and I think he's talked about this quite a bit. But it's pairing unique skills that you have. And so I think for me, what that was my ability to process a lot of data to do the accounting, but then to have the conversation with anyone, right? To be able to pare that down. And that gave me a unique advantage. And so to get to that CFO level, you're having to juggle a lot of things. And so you got to be able to step out of the accounting world, and you got to be able to have conversations with other people. So I would say be a problem solver, take risks, and then look for unique and different opportunities, because that's going to help you flex those muscles, kind of those more creative, less technical muscles. And I think in the long run, that puts you pretty far ahead of kind of the general person in accounting.
Yeah, that fits like right along with a theme that a lot of our guests have, covered the same way that you kind of did, just kind of talking about what things you can go to grow your experience. And it sounds so simple, but looking for more opportunities to gain knowledge in whatever, boring or corporate job you have, seeking those new opportunities out or those new relationships out where you can learn from new people and differentiating yourself that way. It just sounds like such a simple thing, but like you said, it's applicable to all industries, across. Yeah. That can be the way that you get ahead. Those experiences and that knowledge is what you can then parlay into, potentially your entrepreneurial journey. So it just can't be said enough that make the most of the situations you're in, even if it is, Doug made it sound pretty fucking bleak on on some of those accounting things, but it's like if it's a really bleak situation, just make the most out of it with gaining knowledge or finding ways that you can soak up however much you can in each of those situations. And that's what will give you the next step up to get you out of whatever situation that you're really, really unhappy about.
The reality is you're the only one responsible for your outcome, right? You can do a lot of different stuff, but you have to be motivated yourself to push and find those things. And you can't rely on other people for that. And I see so many people saying, well, my boss is bad. Well, this is whatever. Well, it's like, you've got to take some initiative on that. And if you don't take initiative, you will get slaughtered as an entrepreneur, because that's really what it is. And I've seen, all of the entrepreneurs I've worked with are people that are extremely biased to action, right? They're going to move, go in so many cases. And I think that's super important to kind of flex that muscle.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. One of the questions that we ask all the guests on the show is entrepreneurship such a personal thing? How would you describe entrepreneurship or define it?
That's a good question. So for me, the reason I'm doing and going down this path for entrepreneurship is because I've always had the desire and just always, like, in the back of your mind, had this wonder of, can I do it on my own? Right? Mm-hmm. Do I have what it takes to do what I've seen of these great business people? So for me, this entrepreneurial journey is really like this climbing of a mountain for myself, right? And it's seeing what I'm capable of, and that's like, I think I tend to do that in a lot of areas in life, but I think in business, it provides such unique opportunities to really do that and challenge yourself. And so for me, it's the opportunity to get up daily and challenge myself to do something new and see if I can take that next step.
I love that. That's an awesome definition. And I like how you really applied it personally to yourself. And this is like a challenge I'm taking on for myself to see if I can step up to these other people that I admire. Yeah. I think it's a really cool thing. Was there one piece of career advice over the years, either from the other business owners that you worked with or from other people in your life, that you thought, man, this piece of advice was so impactful, this is going to stay with me for the rest of my life?
Yeah. Well, actually, going back to my college days, even, there's one piece of advice that's actually from my mom. So I can always, I guess, attribute some of my life decisions. That's shout out to moms out there, right? So, but I think we look at our career, we look at all these things that go on, and everything feels like it has so much weight. Feels like everything's so important. If we make this one misstep, the world is just going to end. And I was trying to decide between two different jobs, and they were completely different types of jobs, completely different directions. And she kind of said to me, she was like, what happens if you make the wrong choice here? Like, nothing happens. You'll go get another job. You'll go do this. And I was worried, I'm a Christian. And so I was like, well, what if it's not what God wants me to do, or it's not what this? And she's like, dude, like, if you're just seeking out to do what's the best thing, and you're praying about it and doing all these things, whatever is right, like, it doesn't matter. You're going to succeed at whatever you do. If it's not right, you'll move on to the next thing and you'll figure it out. They're all opportunities for learning. And so I think for me, that kind of demystified a little bit some of that change, right? It's that willingness to say, you know what, let's experiment and let's see what happens. And then if it doesn't work, we'll just go on to the next experiment. And so I think quit making failure and quit making this idea that you're going to make the wrong decision. Quit making it such this boogeyman out there that you just can't, my brother's actually an engineer, aerospace engineer, and he will just overanalyze like every situation. He'll just go and he just can't make decisions because he gets locked up. And For whatever reason, when she told me that, it kind of released me from that overanalyzing and said, we're going to get to this 70, 80% and we're going to go and we're going to figure it out. And so for me, that's been something that I've honestly held in every important decision I've made. That's exactly why I took the leap with entrepreneurship. It is like this, people talk about like the regret minimization framework. It was like, I went the direction of I'm going to go the place that I'll have least amount of regret, and I may fail, but that failure will make me even a better partner for that CEO that I would work for in a future CFO job. Right. And so you just kind of got to look at both sides of that coin and understand that. And just let's demystify that fear of just making a decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not getting that analysis paralysis and just saying, look, this is the one I feel is probably the best bet. There's no way of knowing that it's going to be 100% the right thing to do, but you just got to take action on it. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really important. Was there one step along the way? I love how you walked us through the evolution of all those different in your accounting background. Was there one piece that you go back, one decision that you go back to and you're like, man, that was like the best thing I could have done in that moment. And it kind of changed the trajectory that you look back on and just think like, wow, like you were just saying, like, I didn't really know what this decision was going to do, but wow, it really like changed the whole world for me and my whole trajectory.
Yeah. Honestly, I look at, that's a good question. I've not honestly really thought about that. As I think back, I look and I think when I made the job change I did, the last job change I did, where I went from being a CFO at a small business and I went to this one where I had this ownership opportunity. I think the reason I made that change was because kind of sensing that other ownership opportunity kind of slip away. And for a number of months, I was frustrated. And I took a lot of time to actually make that decision because I wanted to determine, was my frustration a personal frustration where I was just getting in my own head, or were these things that could not be fixed, right? Were these things that I was not okay with? And so I think when I came to that realization that it's not a personal problem, it's a business and me problem, like it's, we're just not going to solve this. I think that was truly the point when I realized how important the ownership piece was. And so for me, that's kind of the turning point, is when I said, okay, I am going to start looking. And then I found this opportunity and had this ownership piece. And I think for me, that was probably the big piece that, as I look back, kind of crystallized to me that ownership, that entrepreneurship was what I ultimately wanted when it came down to it.
That's great.
I love how you've talked us through all the communication that you do and the integrity that you hold in high regard, and the way you treat people and the way you've made big decisions throughout your career thus far. I think those are all, great for the audience to hear. Cause a lot of times we talk about, we just talk about like stories or things that we've done, but also talking about the mindset, what you were thinking and feeling as you went through it. I feel like it's so powerful for people to hear. We like to try to take this last little portion of the show to speak to those that are really frustrated, really wanting to get out of the 9-to-5, get out of the corporate drudgery. You talked about it. You mentioned a miserable existence out there. How do we help them go after their dreams and pursue entrepreneurship if that's what they want from life?
Yeah. I would say, kind of going back to the last point I made, never make a decision out of a dissatisfaction of where you currently are. You want to be running towards something, not running away from something. And so I think obviously dissatisfaction is in that moment, it feels like it's the only thing in the world that matters. But if you don't have something you're running to, I've seen a lot of people just jump from thing to thing because they're always running from the last thing. They're always looking for something that's wrong. So I would say make sure that you're running towards something, not away from something. And then start taking the small steps today. Do the next thing that you can do to kind of take that step out. Test the waters before you just go, because I've seen a couple of people that I know that have just quit, jumped right in, and then they realize that this new thing wasn't completely what they wanted either. And then they're still having that questioning, they're still having that uncertainty. And for me, when I stepped out in a direction that I didn't ultimately end up going. I was more focused on the podcast, on the personal finance, on these other things, on books and all that. And then I realized, like, no, business finance is where I'm passionate about. So be willing to just take those small steps. And a lot of times those small steps will help resolve a little bit of that tension that you're having in the short term and give you another outlet for that. And then you can determine, is that dissatisfaction a you thing or is it a you in the business thing, right? And I just cringe in some ways when I see people become so eager to just be done, because then I think you cloud your decision making. You don't make the best decision. And then again, it isn't about overthinking it. It's just about not making a decision out of fear or out of running, but instead making a decision because you're proactively choosing the new thing.
Yeah, because that'll lead you straight into another bad situation if you're making decisions that way. So you're a young guy, Kurtis. What do you have on the horizon here? I like the passion that you bring to what you do. What's ahead for Kurtis Hanni?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm focused on growing my fractional CFO business. And so I'm trying to build my team, trying to bring on CFOs, trying to make it a business, not just me talking to people, right? and so I've hired a few people and I'm really starting to work towards that. But long term, I think, my goal is to be able to use my platform, whether that be my newsletter or my social media, to really, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, demystify financials, demystify the numbers for business owners. And so ultimately, I want to be able to educate. I want to be able to bring people into that platform. And then I want to be able, for those people that are qualified and for those people who are needing it, help them not only through the education, but then help them through providing of the service. And so that's kind of my broad strokes plan.
Yeah.
I think, some of that will change along the way, but I think ultimately I want to build a business behind the fractional CFO stuff and then be able to continue to flex my muscles, because I just enjoy creating, I enjoy teaching, and enjoy that element of it as well.
I love that. Speaking of the educational portion, what is it that you feel is the most value that people derive from your newsletter? Why are so many people flocking to it?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's, when you look at the people that are in my newsletter, it's a lot of small to medium business owners that either, they're just trying to learn. They're just trying to learn how to better understand their business finances. And what I've been told by, probably, I wouldn't claim this myself, but people say I'm good at it, so I'll just claim it. They say I do a good job. Yeah. They say I do a good job of really taking complex topics and really being able to explain them simply. And so if you feel like you've had that, it's a mystery to you, just passively subscribe, and hopefully I can teach you stuff over a short or long period of time, and you'll feel like day after day, you're just getting a little bit better at understanding your numbers, understanding your finances. Because the reality is, it's a lifelong journey. I'm still learning stuff all the time. And so I just hope I can be a piece of that lifelong journey and help you grow your business, make better financial decisions with it, and ultimately be able to achieve whatever goal you're wanting with that, whether that be more freedom, whether that be higher net worth, whether that be building a bunch of businesses. Hopefully I can I use stories, and then I use the concepts to try and really drive those concepts home, and hopefully that makes it attainable for people even with no background in it.
That's awesome, brother. Well, you got me locked in now. What I love about your story is that through doing this podcast, we're 50 plus episodes in now. There's so many paths for people to find their freedom. And I love how you broke down for us the path that you were on and how you said, this isn't the path I want to be on. And you intentionally planned out the path that leads you to where you do want to be. And you've really taken actionable steps along the way to make sure that you keep tweaking it to get to where you think is the best fit for you. And I love that you were able to walk us through that vision for your journey today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, glad I could do that. It was fun to kind of reflect on that a little bit.
So much fun. Thank you so much, Kurtis.
Yeah, Kurtis, if people are going to want to reach out to you, where's the best spot for us to send them?
Yeah, go to my personal website. I'm sure you'll put the link in there, kurtishanni.com, Kurtis with the K, and subscribe to my newsletter. If you're a Twitter or LinkedIn person, I'm also on those platforms, so you can look me up. But my newsletter is kind of where I like to send everyone, and hopefully can help you kind of get a deeper understanding of your numbers. So
beautiful. Thanks so much, Kurtis. This was killer.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Being an entrepreneur is hard. That is why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources that you need to find your own freedom.